Here's a bit of a story time with Ronnie. I'm trying to record stories for you guys, but it's a little bit difficult. So right now, he's over here. I'm over here. It seems to be working out a little bit better. Going back to the topic, as how I started, so I can continue to tell you more about it. It's my previous relationships were quite intense in terms of what we went through. However, also pretty colorful in terms of what we learned. And one of the things that we understand is that we are preconditioned with how we grow up, with our rewiring that we receive from our parents, from our bringing, our society we've been surrounded by. And it's not necessarily our choice how it happened. What we can do later on is, through relationships, we start to understand by mirroring each other in it, whether we like or not, what we actually present. As we know that usually person who's in the relationship with us is mirroring us to us, which is the biggest experience and the biggest lesson we can actually get. So instead of getting angry, feisty, or getting into arguments, it's very interesting and very important for you to listen and see if there are pieces of you in it that are allowing that person to behave in a certain way as well. And I understood this after my first relationship. It was 6 years together where we had a great chunk of memories, traveled the world, had unconditional love, the true love that you can get, which I think we were pretty lucky to have. And maybe it didn't really end in the best possible scenario. However, I think the way we found each other is also that we both didn't have perfect families like most of us aren't. However, we matched pretty much what we both were missing in our families and wanted badly both of us to have it fulfilled in that relationship, with having obviously a lot of expectations and projections. Very unconsciously at that point, everything was pretty much not on the aware state of mind, more like just working from the autopilot. And this is the relationship which pretty much taught me the most, and I'm still super grateful for things that happened. Maybe if we weren't so preconditioned in our childhood in a certain way, we could have ended it on a better note, maybe less dramatic. However, it is what it is. So very grateful for every single great moment that we had together, and as well every single lesson I learned after we broke up. And that gave me like a lot of motivation to learn and actually start this journey on how to rewire yourself. As alright, we were preconditioned, we were given set of features, characteristics, set of behaviors as an example, which was the only one we ever had because it was our parents or just the closest people that we grew up with. But we can change that, and so many people aren't aware that they are actually doing something wrong because they're just following the patterns that they had, and they think this is the right way because this is the only way they know. And I wish we all had those lessons at school that were actually showing you how to do the relationships right. What are the features of unhealthy patterns, how you can rewire them, how you can grow together, how you can communicate it and mirror it to another person so they can grow and change and see those things too, and how we can actually see it ourselves. Well, seeing it ourselves is probably almost impossible. It's the person that is next to you and their reactions and that relationship that you can then evaluate and look at things and see that maybe this isn't the right way. And even if you didn't like how your parents treated each other and you knew this was wrong, but you simply also didn't know how to make those things right at times they found like difficult, and you didn't really see like what would be the possible outcome, or in practice it was just more difficult than it even looked on the paper, like what would you do if you had the same situation. So it is really all about the practice and putting this into action to understand where we got it wrong. And I learned a bunch of great new things after my first long relationship ended. I tried to reprogram completely myself, where in the process I lost as well a little bit of a self-confidence, as I didn't feel like I'm grounded, that everything that I've learned felt like it was completely new, like I was actually learning everything from scratch. And it felt like I didn't really verify this new knowledge yet. So I don't feel like, it's a little bit still wobbly. I don't know if this is the right way. I've learned it. I've seen some new patterns from new people. But is this going to work out for me? Is this how I want to feel in the relationship? Again, it looked great on the paper, on the examples. But is it going to also work for me? And by that point, I also learned a lot about different personality disorders, as when the first boyfriend that I had actually had some mental issues at the end that came up from his traumas from childhood, that again wasn't really necessarily his fault, but he was preconditioned to them and prone to them due to, first of all, genetics, second of all, actually his upbringing and what he went through as a child, and never really had a chance to heal or do something about it. Later on, obviously, as we broke up, I hope he did, and I hope he's doing well. However, it isn't easy, and this is very difficult, and also very difficult to understand that you thought you're doing great, you thought that you're actually putting a lot of effort into your life to live to the highest, and then turns out that it wasn't right. And it's like, well, were you living a little bit of a lie your whole life? And it is a difficult thing to admit that even though you thought it was right, even though you put 100% effort, that it wasn't right and it wasn't working. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of guts to do it. Therefore, many people actually, even if they feel something is off, they just don't change. They just don't want to see it. And I applaud to everyone who finds themselves enough courage and motivation to start over, to rewire, to change, to be a better person. If you're already doing this, you're honestly better than 99% of the people on this planet already. So well done you. And going back to the topic of personality disorders, there were some that also I could see in my mom that were later on repeated in my first partner, first boyfriend. And that really interlinked to me as well, how I was attracted to him and how I was accepting a lot of bad behaviors because I was just comfortable with it. I just knew how to deal with this. It was recognizable for me. It was familiar. Even though it wasn't right, it never felt right. I just knew that it was a part of my reality, and I assumed it should be. And now this rewiring was a long process. It was probably one of the hardest and deepest point of my life, but it was also one of the most amazing moments of my life where I just found much more courage than ever to change. I suppose that's what they sometimes say, that the biggest inventions, the biggest great achievements were actually plotted with the devil's needs. So that is definitely true, even though it wasn't really to be aware of that it was wrong or right. But it definitely required a lot of effort, a lot of self-consciousness, self-aware, and, well, work. Definitely a lot of work and time to practice those new things. I remember I was learning every single day so much, reading so many books, listening to so many coaches. To name a few, Gottmans, Hendrik, maybe you've heard about those people, Jay Shetty, Mel Robbins, Ramani, Dr. Ramani. There are so many of them. Esther Perel. I definitely recommend. And I felt like my brain was smashing. I was like, where is this knowledge? Like, why are we not getting this knowledge at school or anywhere else super easy, accessible, like maths or geography? Because this is our life. This is how we live our life. This is our happiness. This is our relationships. Everything we do is based on relationships, whether it's with friends, with work, with partners, with family. Why are we not taught those most basic things in life? I suppose we were meant to learn it from our parents, but they're also not taught. They're just taught by their own parents, and there's actually no really middle ground or biggest example to actually show us what's right or what's wrong. And that work on relationships also came with a huge, massive change in terms of mindset, in terms of self-growth, in terms of my career changes, in terms of what I want to do, what I want to be led by in life, in activating my intuition that was really deactivated for so long as my coping mechanism when I was a child. And really getting back to all those basics, it all came together as a whole. I wasn't just learning about the relationships, but all those people who were teaching about it, they also had a different mindset. And then all the really key, amazing business people, they were also talking this way about relationships and also about different things about business. And it's all very, very correlated when you start to think about it and really connecting the dots. So I just realized that I went through a massive, massive immersion and change in terms of how I thought, how I want to live, how I interact with people. And also, this kind of huge change will also verify who are those people who will stay with you in your life. Because this kind of change, you can't really expect everyone to still treat you and like you the same way, because with that change also comes your personality change, the way you see world, how you bring the boundaries up in relationships. You start to verify whether not just your family, your partner, but how did you actually lead your friendship groups, how did you come up with work relationships, how did that go? And you start to really evaluate your life on every single level. And I think this is how we should be looking at it. We should be looking at it holistically. Once you start making changes about yourself, your self-growth, your boundaries, you start to get to know each other, you know yourself, and you start to value yourself and actually understand how to love yourself. You start to understand how your relationship with other people should look like. And definitely this process involves some people to not really agree with your new image, your new you, and they will decide to leave you behind, or rather you leave them behind because you're leveling up and they just decided not to be in that part of your life anymore. And this is absolutely fine, because you do need space for new people in your life, new people that will be the ones that resonate with the new you and will take you to even next level in your life. And this is really what happened. When I started to change, I started to meet a bunch of different people while traveling, just living, going out there. And I was really surprised how suddenly after those changes, I started to meet so many new people. I was just attracted to so many different people. And I obviously kept my old friendships and had to rewire the relationships within my family. Some of the people didn't like the way I changed, but I also didn't really want to put up with the level of toxicity that they were giving me. But now I knew my boundaries. I knew how to respect the boundaries and both people. And if they decided not to, it's a free will for everyone to live the way they want to. And I have to say that even leaving those people behind didn't really feel wrong. It felt like it was just this heavy lift that was there for quite some time and it just needed to go. And it's not that I closed my doors forever. It's more that if you start to accept and understand who I am, the new me, I'm very happy to chat to you and have a really great relationship. However, there's nothing to be pressured, pushed, or you really don't want to make people like you. If they don't like you, it's okay. There's going to be a bunch of other people who are going to adore you for just who you are. And that's just a part of life. We're not going to resonate with everyone, and definitely not going to resonate with everyone just because they are our blood, right? I mean, there's so many different people in the world that it's just not a must. It's not a rule that we have to get along with all the members of our family or stay friends forever with everyone we meet. Definitely not. And when I started to understand all those basic things in life, it just became much more clear. I became so much more happy. I also started to consciously build my function of happiness, doing things that make me happy consciously every single day, every single week, depending on the short-term goals, long-term goals, and I keep them up. And it turns out that yes, we can definitely create our own happiness, and it's actually not that hard as when we actually know what to do. Later on, I started dating, and I got to practice what I preach and my new knowledge, and I actually stumbled upon, well, a person that was actually having the features of a narcissistic person. Well, in the previous relationship, it was a completely different opposite of spectrum. It was a person that was more like not really secure. It was a little bit more unstable. Whereas here it was the other spectrum, which was I wasn't really putting so much attention to when I was actually learning about it. And then I just had to. I knew that there are certain things. I mean, I did not study psychology after all. However, after that period of time, I felt like I could easily get one. And I just dived deeper into it. However, I let this time my intuition into place, and I started to trust it. And I started to understand that there were many moments where there was a lot of words, not a lot of actions, that there were things that weren't really aligned with me. And that led me to actually question the whole relationship after 3 months, which was already a big step for me, because many times I would just, overstay in places. I would just think like, oh, maybe let's give it another chance, let's give it another shot. Maybe, I already invested the time, let's invest more, because it makes sense. And yes, and I actually started to set boundaries. I started to speak up about things that really didn't feel well in my gut, and I let it all out. And within 6 months and trials and errors and testing a little bit more, we ended things. And it was actually, I was really proud of myself for understanding, first of all, that those things like narcissistic personality disorder exist, and how to recognize some of the features. I'm not saying he was a narcissist, I'm just saying that he definitely had some of the characteristics of the narcissistic personality disorder, and it could be very toxic. Therefore, thinking about, trying to change those things or put them to light, nothing of those things could change or seemed that he even wanted to work on, which even more pushed me into thinking that just it isn't the right person. It isn't going to make me happy, but more miserable. And it's the first time that actually felt so negative. I don't think ever in my life, even in the first relationship, I felt so out of energy. It's one of the characteristics of that personality disorder as well, is being very negative, bringing things down, putting yourself a lot into the victim mode, and constantly just, putting all of it on your partner. And I was pretty much glad that it ended. Maybe, thinking now backwards, could have ended it when I actually ended it for the first time, which was after 4 months. Anyway, I still feel like it was a great achievement that after what I've learned, it actually worked out, that those things, that time that I put into learning those new things, rewiring, really worked out, and I could spot those things, and I can later on start to attract people who I'm going to resonate with. And this is something I am working on and trying to understand what were the parts of him that I resonated with, and where I should be a little bit more careful when I look at the person. But I think this is already a great achievement, to be able to spot those things, to be able to change the direction, and first of all be aware of that direction and be aware of where things are going, and that this isn't a luck, but it's actually something you can have a lot of control over. I did caught up with anxieties coming down from my childhood, and that I have to say it hit hard. It is this phenomenon that when you're around 30, a lot of those things actually start to come to light, and I saw it with my first boyfriend, then I saw it with some of my friends, then it came the time for me. And yeah, basically, even though I was actually doing a lot of meditation, I was already on my really big mindfulness journey, and I was able to calm myself down mentally, not really feel anxious myself in the mental way, if that makes sense. However, my body was starting to give me different reactions. As we know, all the traumas are actually hidden and kept in our body, as when we react as children or when it happens, we start to have these physical symptoms that later on get stored and are living with us for a long time. And I started to have this very high pulse, very high blood pressure, and I was like, what is going on? I obviously got tested from the bottom to the top, and turns out nothing was wrong with me, and the only thing that was wrong was the level of stress. And even though I didn't feel anxious, it was the anxiety that was hidden inside me. And that's just another journey of how we can actually heal from it, and this is also something I would love to talk to you more about, and how to overcome this, because it is definitely possible. There's a lot of ways to do it, and there's a lot of ways to make sure that you're living your life, not your anxiety for you. And the same with the relationships. It's not just that you're learning about the relationships, but it's this holistic way of how you're approaching your whole life in a mindful way, how you value yourself, how you set boundaries in your life, not just in the relationships, but with your life, with things that are happening to you, and how you subconsciously think about your life, what you deserve, and your self-esteem, as well as just your own way of thinking. It's all holistic approach towards that. So when I was even on the second relationship, I was actually much more aware about where I wanted to be in life, what I wanted to have. I had much more clear goals, and that also allowed me to understand that it isn't really like about being personal, or this isn't about me or him or whatever. It is really just also about how I want my life to look like, how I feel things resonate with me, and this just didn't as the whole in the picture. It just starts to switch the perspective. You're no longer taking things personally, but you're actually knowing your ground, you're knowing your self-worth, and you're just not allowing this to happen to you. You're not allowing for this kind of relationship to exist in your life, and it just becomes much more easy, at least from my perspective, to understand that this isn't for you, and end things on a much more reasonable note. Not even so emotional, as obviously you always go through emotions because you're losing someone that you had in your life, but this change, you don't really seem like it's something very dramatic, drastic. It's more as a change towards a better opportunity for both of you, and even if it hurts, you know that the long term you're gonna be better off, both of you. So yeah, you just have a different approach to things. It's just much more self-aware. You understanding things are much more clear, even though there's still so many question marks that are happening in your life, but you feel like there's a lot more control when you let go, in a way, and when you start to understand yourself, start to feel yourself. It feels like when you let yourself feel your higher self, your intuition, everything starts to have much more sense than when you start to take control, when you start to want to actually understand everything or push through things or pressure things to happen for you. Sometimes it's better to take a step back, observe, let yourself feel, and follow that rather than try to pursue something, forcing something that is actually against the current that you're currently in. Many times it's just really leading things with intuition and starting to trust it and feeling much better. And this also has a lot to do with manifestation and your subconscious way of thinking. It's all very combined. So this is why this account is about not just relationships, but actually most importantly, mindfulness, mindset. And I'm here to help you not go through this whole process that I had to go through, but have it just much more easier, accessible for you, to make you feel joy in life, feel peaceful and aligned with yourself, and also be able to find your path in your life that will guide you to your happy life and your happy place.